Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic, let's do it. What's the eeriest feeling you've ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. One night my parents were out. It was about midnight, and I, being the oldest, was watching my brother, who was going into 6th grade at the end of summer. His friend, my sister, going into 7th grade, her friend, and my 5-year-old brother. My older brother, we'll call him B1, and his friend, we will call F1, were downstairs playing games on their phones with me. We were at the kitchen table, which is right next to the back door. I was engrossed in my game when I noticed a sudden flash of light. Initially, I mistook it for a storm, but it wasn't accompanied by any sound. F1 speaks and says, "Did anyone else see that light?" I said, "You saw that too?" Spending a moment imagining what it could be creeped me out. The reason this freaked me out so much was that the same week, 3 days before, this car started to follow me and my brother down the street as we were coming home from the pool at 10 p.m. A flashing light, like a camera flash, was intermittently triggered from the back seat. I started walking up the driveway as I was next to, and the car sped off. I went upstairs and decided to get a head check on everyone and at least move our gaming operation upstairs. As I'm going up, I checked the window by our stairs, and the night sky is clear. I ran up and got B2. I then told my sister and her friend F2. My sister is not calm at all in situations like this, and she freaked out. I was pretty unnerved too, but I kept my composure. We locked ourselves in my parents' room because it was the only room with a lock, which made us feel better. F2 peered out the window, and she thought she was someone standing outside, but she couldn't tell, neither could I. I figured it could be some kids playing with flashlights in the street behind us. My parents came home after we told them, and we all went downstairs to talk. I see another flash from my living room, and I think about it for a second. Feeling much better than my parents were home, I asked, "Did anyone else see that flash?" My sister and F2 hadn't seen a flash, but F2 says, "I did actually." We went to bed, and it wasn't until the next morning I realized a flashlight couldn't illuminate our whole back door from the street behind us, as it was in front of the houses, behind us a good 200 yards, 0.18 kilometers, at least. Nothing else came of that, but some other stuff has happened in our backyard. It's just not as major as that. B1 says he saw something white dart across our backyard in the middle of the night, but no one else was down there because he says up to the latest. Another incident happened to me around 11 or 12 p.m. The occurrence were recent, almost a month ago. I was sitting on my bed listening to music when I heard a series of knocks coming from my wall. It wasn't just a bang, it was a pattern actually, and it came one more time right next to my head, which was at the head of my bed. I kept listening to my music, thinking my sister did it. Not 5 minutes later, it happened again. I got up to tell my sister to stop banging on the wall when I realized the banging was coming from the other side of the wall. But the other side of the wall is my backyard, and I'm on the 2nd floor. I double-checked that my sister didn't bang on the wall, but she didn't. We looked in the back, but saw nothing, and that was that. That's all I have to share for now, and hopefully it stays that way for a while. I'm experiencing a reoccurring dream. For the last 4 nights, I've been having a reoccurring nightmare featuring Jeff Goldblum. Nice. So we're in this super dark house, both wearing sick leather jackets. The jackets resemble those of the Hardy Boys. Anyway, we found 3 bodies with no skin. I said, "What the Jeff Goldblum said, "You shouldn't swear, but yeah, this is wild, right?" We see a side door. I open it. 50 yards, 46 meters, back is a steel building, and there's a gravel driveway leading to it, and lining this drive is a wood post fence, about 30 feet, 9 meters away. There's this super weird little thing. It stands approximately 3 feet tall, and has a large, bulbous, round head. The head lacks eyes and is adorned with black pits, and it gets just a bit closer, and you see the stitched together patchwork of skin hanging loosely off of it because it's all far too big. It sees me rip off the arm skin, and there's this gnarled looking gray arm that's super skinny and points at me. It lets out this soul-wrenching screech and slowly walks toward me. Jeff Goldblum places his hand on my shoulder and commands, "You should wake up now, buddy." and I comply. Every night, I've dreamed that the object is getting closer. Last night, I could smell it, even when I woke up. When I was about 11 or 12, we lived in this house out in the country in South Dakota. It was a pretty big place, but only had 3 bedrooms, which my 2 brothers and I had to share one. I slept on a twin-size mattress on one side of the room closest to the door, and my oldest and younger bros shared a bigger bed on the opposite side. Every night before going to bed, my brothers and I would pray out loud together, and afterwards we would make the sign of the cross in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit over our bodies, and then we would kiss the cross that we made with our fingers. Well, for some reason, one day my mom told us not to kiss the cross anymore afterwards. We all agreed, and later that night we got done praying, and we made the sign of the cross again, and then I heard a kiss pretty close to me. It was dark in the room, and I just said out loud, "Guys, Mom said not to do the kiss thing anymore," which they both replied at the same time, "We didn't. We thought you did." I got really bad goosebumps and prayed silently until I fell asleep. Pretty creepy. I was a first-year college student. I flunked my calculus exam so bad 80% of the class got a score of 15% and below. I was one of them. I was pissed at myself and really depressed about what happened. Went out of the dorm later that same night around 1 a.m.-ish. I was just crying outside my dorm when somebody approached me and asked me about what happened. Then I told him everything, and the pressure that's building up inside me because of college, and it's the best college we have in the Philippines, which adds even more pressure. Then he just went and comforted me about what happened and told me to look at it from another angle and such. I was really relieved and felt better talking to the guy. I also asked him where he lived so I can treat him to lunch sometime for the help he gave. We bid our farewells, and it was the best sleep I've had ever since I went to college. I never saw that guy's face since. The place was pretty dim, but he told me he lived underneath our room. The housing complex or dorm I'm in is on the side of a hill. The architecture of our housing complex is truly unique. The next morning I felt more alive, and I immediately headed to my landlady to ask about the guy I met last night. She told me that nobody has ever stayed in that room for years. She even provided me with the room's key, which I used to enter and discover a dusty room that had been abandoned for years. Since that time, I have been perpetually curious about the identity of the individual with whom I conversed, and I have yet to express my gratitude in a manner that is appropriate.
I saw a shadow person. When I was about 17, I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. It was a pretty old building in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, and, according to his dad, it used to be owned by Al Capone, but I'm not sure how true that was. We had an apartment on the top floor that they let us just hang out in, and it allowed us easy access to the roof so we could go smoke cigarettes. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. Once I finished, I ascended the stairs to reach the attic section that connected to the roof. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. We had those old flip phones with lights, so you only had the light from the screen to help navigate the cluttered mess that was up there. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. This wasn't just a shadow cast by the light of my phone, it felt solid like a person. I followed the direction it went, thinking it was my friend. I kept saying that I knew it was him and asked him to stop playing around. The figure passed me a few more times before heading to the other side of the attic, and that's when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. I have no idea what that shadow figure was. It really freaked me out, so I told my friend what happened and said that I did not want to go back up there. I turned off the freeway in the middle of the night and had about 60 miles, 97 kilometers, left before arriving home. There were no cars on the road. The forest was slowly encroaching on the road, and mist was slowly sweeping in. I couldn't use my high beams because of the mist, which reflected most of the light. After about 20 to 30 minutes without seeing a single car, a 10-foot high and 8-foot wide clown face emerged from the mist right in front of me, moving a bit slower than me. It was terrifying. Apparently, it was an ambulant amusement park on the road, and it was trailing vehicle. I'm sure they did that on purpose. Back in 1994, I was in my final year of high school. My best friend also lived on the same street as me. We had known each other since around 4 or 5. Went all through school together. We spent countless hours playing at each other's homes. So this one day I felt a bit out of sorts. I couldn't really explain it, and I decided to go for a walk and get fresh air. Something that I rarely did at that time. The previous time I did something like that was probably months, if not a full year before, so it wasn't a regular routine. I walked down the street and passed his house. I saw his mom putting out some garbage for the next day's pickup, but I didn't say anything to her. I remember feeling weird as I passed their house. I don't know the best way to describe it. Not sad, maybe depressed or anxious. Unsettled is probably a better word. I kinda shrugged it off and continued my walk for the next 15 minutes or so and returned home. After being home for about half an hour, there's a knock at my door. My mom answers it and says it's for me. So I go down, and there's my friend, eyes red and puffy, face wet with tears. How my mom completely missed this is beyond me, so I ask him what's wrong, and he blurts out, "My dad died today." I had known his dad for as long as I'd known him, so it was a bit of a shock. We sat on my porch and talked for about an hour. It was very uncomfortable for me, since that sort of thing was new to me. I didn't know what to say, so I let him do most of the talking. Now the caveat to this was his dad died of lung cancer. He was a non-smoker. For whatever reason, his mom chose not to share the news with me. However, I had 2 hints months earlier that something was up. I saw a wheelchair in their house once, but his dad was in the medical profession, so I assumed there was something to do with that. And the second, I once saw his dad with a baseball cap on in the house as he walked upstairs. I'd never seen him wear a baseball cap, either indoors or outdoors. But even with that info and suspicions that maybe he was fighting cancer in the back of my head, why on that specific day did I need to get out and go for a walk, and why did I head toward their house, and why did I pause by the house and get a weird sensation? It's probably just a coincidence, but who knows? I mean, if we're thinking critically and logically, then yes, it was just a coincidence. Because, things happen, and the man was sick, and you went for a walk, and all these things happened because they were supposed to. Was it a coincidence, or was it by design? What do you think? Premonitions. As a child, I experienced these dreams more frequently, but as an adult, they have become less frequent as I age. As a child, I would often dream night before events that would happen at school or home that weren't what would be called predictable, from the perspective of, well, that happens every day. I clearly remember sitting at my desk in 5th or 6th grade when a friend of mine went to the paper cabinet to get graph paper at the teacher's request to hand out to the class for the first period of the day. I had a dream where my friend opened the cabinet and found no graph paper, prompting me to blurt out, "There's none there." The whole class looks at me. No one had been in class before it started apart from the teacher, so when the friend opened the cabinet, and sure enough no graph paper, the teacher accused me of sneaking into the class beforehand. A few other friends immediately defended me because we had been playing before class, but I was considered the creepy kid for a while after that. I refrained from speaking about such matters in the future. I was about 5 or so, and we had just moved from Massachusetts to Texas to take care of my grandma. She was 70, had been fighting cancer for about 5 or 6 years, and it had spread pretty much throughout her whole body, so she was on home hospice. She was in a wheelchair the few times she was awake during the day, and always had an oxygen tank on her. It started as lung cancer because she smoked for so long. All other times, she was in a cot like you'd see in any hospital, with a colostomy bag, IV, and the works. My mom mainly took care of her, but there was an on-call nurse as well to manage medical equipment and supplies, and just to do general palliative care and checkups. I remember this obviously, so I really don't believe it was a dream at all. I remember getting up in the middle of the night once and going out into the kitchen to get a drink. Now, my grandma stayed in the living room or den area because it was more spacious, and I had to pass through there to get to the kitchen. I intended to snitch a soda from the fridge. I was a little shit who knew I shouldn't have it, so I was banking on my grandma being asleep. She most definitely was not. My grandma asked me what I was doing, as she could be stern, so I lied and said I wanted some water. Satisfied with this, she proceeded to undress and swing her legs off the side of the cot. She used her IV rack to ease herself onto the floor, and then started hobbling off in the other direction. I was only 5, but I understood the situation and how delicate she was. Even if I didn't really understand death or dying yet, I could tell how skinny and sick she was, and that it was a big deal. I always had to be careful with her when we were playing. She liked to watch me play video games on our old Sega Genesis. Occasionally, she'd play columns with me, or when I wanted to cuddle or something. I asked my grandma where she was going, because I couldn't recall her ever going anywhere without her wheelchair. She told me she needed to go pee, and no, I didn't have to wake my mom up to help her. I dismissed her request, wished her a good night, expressed my love for her, sprinted off to steal the Coke, and quickly returned to my room before she could witness my action. The following day, I woke to a flurry of activity and learned of my grandma's death that previous night. As previously mentioned, my understanding of death was limited, so witnessing the process of putting my grandma into the black bag left me utterly confused. My older sister, who was in her late teens at the time, attempted to explain death to me through her tears, but all I could recall was jumping on the bed carelessly. Don't get me wrong, I love this woman. It just never really quite hit me. Years later, the subject comes up again, and I recall the experience with my mom. I told her that I couldn't believe Grammy died the same night I saw her walk. Maybe it was a heart attack or something that made it sudden, but my mom was stuck on the fact I said that she walked. She told me that Grammy was paralyzed from the waist down, and that's when I realized that's why I'd never seen her without the wheelchair. To this day, I cannot be convinced that I dreamt it. It's far too clear in my mind, and I've never had any other dream as clear. My mom chalks it up to the Lord was bringing her home, but given that I'm no longer religious, I can't bring myself to accept that explanation either. Remembering that experience with the new context of knowing she was paralyzed from the waist down at the time always seems so surreal to me. Happened years ago on a dark summer night at 3 a.m. on the dot. Being bored teenage boys, me and my friends who lived down the road would sneak out to have a smoke. As we were walking out of his driveway, we hear a gut-wrenching scream of a woman calling out for help. She was screaming as if she was being repeatedly stabbed. The screaming was really loud, but in the darkness we couldn't pinpoint where it was from. I instantly turned around and ran back in the house. My friend followed me behind me. Now, here's where it gets fucking creepy. We brought a video camera out with us to record our little night journey. Once inside, we play back the video to listen for the scream again, but we never heard it in the playback. It was just a video of us saying, "What the f-?" while panicking and running back terrified into the house, apparently from nothing. I was walking to the bus stop at the age of 13 and it was starting to get dark. I suddenly had an urgent feeling to cross the road to the other side. I had no idea why. The bus stop was ahead on the side I was walking, so I had no reason to cross, but I did. When I got to the other side, I was bewildered at what I had this urgent feeling to cross. I looked back to the other side and saw that a car had pulled over. The engine was still running, and the driver was still in his seat. It was then I saw a second man hiding behind a wall. He was waiting for me to walk past to pull me into the car. If I hadn't followed my gut feeling, I hate to think what would have happened. Driving home one very hot evening, took a route that took us in the area of an oil refinery storage tanks on either side of the road, kind of a no man's land, and I see an old lady with short hair trudging along with a backpack. Looks like she's seen better days. I just think, poor old gal, as we drive past, but my wife says, "Should we call the police?" I'm like, "Why? It's still daylight. She'll be okay. My wife says, she? That boy could not have been more than 15 years old. I say, boy, it was a transient old crone. We debate a bit. Then I turn around and drive past again. Now I'm on the side to get a better view. Holy shit. How did I see it so wrong? It's a kid. And I start to tell my wife she was right. She says, oh, sorry, you were right. She sees the old lady now. We're looking at the same person as we drive back by to head home. One more glance. Neither of us were sure of anything, and to this day have no idea what we saw. I used to take drugs pretty heavily, and even hours after the drug's effect had worn off, I noticed the side effect. I could get random hallucinations. I was walking down a road in the middle of the night home from a friend's house. It was extremely dark, so it was difficult to see anything, yet I felt like I could see a person across the street from me. I eyed the character the entire time while continuing to walk, and I noticed something really off with the person. Their clothes were completely pitch black, yet a streetlight wasn't too far away. I noticed that the light emitted onto the street around the person, yet not on the person themselves. My mind had been racing with ideas until then, but when I realized that, I thought it might be a hallucination, and had not been racing with ideas until then, but when I realized that, I thought it might be a hallucination. My mind had been racing with lots of ideas up to that point, but when I realized that part, I started to think it might be a hallucination. I called out to it and actually got a response, but the response was from behind, and it was a middle-aged woman who wondered who I was trying to talk to. The character was still there when I looked again, and I realized I probably needed to lower the amount of drugs. I was at a funeral with my boyfriend, and my boyfriend and I were holding each other, both crying, when she abruptly put her arm between us to break up the grief and introduced herself as the pastor's wife. Everyone was mingling. This lady came up to us. My boyfriend and I were holding each other, both crying, and she straight up inserted her arm between us to break up the grieving and introduced herself as the pastor's wife. The pastor she mentioned involved the funeral, and I'd never heard of him. We were confused and had gray, unkempt, frizzy hair and white eyes. She may have had cataracts, but her appearance was reminiscent of a character. She took my boyfriend's hand, looked him in the eyes with an unwavering gaze, and stated that she knew in her heart that he wasn't right with the Lord. He needed to accept this fact and change his actions to get on the right path because Jesus has a plan for him. She kept repeating, Jesus is watching you, and it isn't good, and told me I should watch out. We just smiled and nodded and went on our way. It was so intense, not to mention highly inappropriate for the scenario. When we got in the car, we asked ourselves, what just happened? Furthermore, that lives pretty behaved life. He's literally never even had a sip of alcohol. Fast forward to the next day. I have a Facebook request from an unfamiliar person. I brush it off. 30 minutes later, it clicks in my brain. That's the pastor whose wife spoke to us. Remembered the last name from her introduction. I conducted some stalking, verified the legitimacy of the page, and recognized him from my attendance at the funeral. I find his wife's page, and all her photos are of her dressed in clown suits and clown makeup. The strangest part of it is, my boyfriend doesn't have a Facebook. We obviously don't have the same last name. I never introduced myself or gave her any inclination as to what my name could be. They had to have asked the family our names because that is the only explanation for finding me. I immediately declined his request and blocked them both because I don't want to deal with any negativity. Bye. Used to go on adventures with my ex late at night. We could often venture out into the country by car. Once, we made it to a very secluded set of roads, fields for days, and the occasional factory, with no street lights and no other cars around. I pulled into one of the factories to turn around and head home. It had a few lights on the wall that were very dim and some flashing. The kind of vibe typical of a horror movie building, but whatever. When I pulled in, I sat there a while. We stared at the building instead of turning around at the building. All of a sudden, I get a mix of emotions, a mix of hopelessness, fear, and depression. My stomach sunk, and I felt the need to get out of there as quickly as possible. That's when my ex started screaming. At that moment, my ex began yelling at me, urging me to leave immediately. It seemed she was experiencing the same feelings. Believe in the paranormal stuff, but that feeling was something I never felt before. I'm guessing it's what people feel when they feel the presence of a demon. Maybe it was employed at an addiction and mental health hospital.